So, have you ever wondered if there are hidden patterns in the world? Messages buried deep inside our most sacred texts, even our languages. Well, today we're diving into a really complex data system that claims it's found one, and it's a big one. A profound, data-driven mystery that apparently connects ancient scriptures using some seriously powerful modern computation.
Okay, so right off the bat, the source material we're digging into makes this huge comparison. It calls this system a real-life Da Vinci Code. Now, that's a bold claim, right? But the idea here is that we're talking about a hidden code that wasn't found by some fictional professor, but was supposedly uncovered by a modern, powerful data engine.
And that really gets to the heart of what we're looking at today. What if the code isn't in a story, but in the data itself? The central claim is that this system has found a narrative that is statistically significant. We're talking about a story told not with words, but with probabilities, ciphers, and just mountains of data points. Okay, so let's start right there. We're going to dig into this core assertion, this idea that some super sophisticated engine has found a pattern that is absolutely not random, a pattern that links ancient texts together through this wild web of linguistic codes, and it all seems to point to one consistent message.
And let's be super clear about this. The analysis we're breaking down argues this isn't just random chance. It's not like seeing a face in the clouds. No, this is presented as something structured, something repeatable, a phenomenon that, if you believe the statistical models, is pretty much impossible to have happened by accident. So that brings up the big question, right? How does this whole thing even work? To really get a grip on the claims being made, we've got to pop the hood and see what's inside this chord concordance engine.
So what is the ANI Constellation Concordance Engine? Well, you can kind of think of it like a universal translator, but for meaning. It takes a phrase, any phrase, and then it runs it through over 100 different methods. These are called linguistic ciphers, to turn that phrase into numbers. Then it takes those numbers and goes on a hunt, searching for exact matches inside these huge databases of sacred texts.
Okay, so here's the process broken down into 4 basic steps. First, they feed the system a specific list of 547 phrases. Step 2, it applies more than 100 different ciphers to every single one of those phrases. Ciphers are really just rules for turning letters into numbers. Step 3, it takes all those numerical results and checks them against texts like the Bible, the Quran, and a massive index called Strong's Concordance. And finally, step 4, the system finds and logs every single match it discovers, creating this huge network of connections.
All right, which brings us to the absolute core of the argument here. Is this just a massive coincidence? Are all these connections just noise? Well, the analysis claims that the pattern it's found is so strong, it can't be random. I mean, think about it. From just 547 phrases, this engine spits out over 63,000 connections. Now, that number sounds huge, right? But is it actually meaningful from a statistical point of view? To figure that out, the analysis uses a really powerful computer simulation to get to the bottom of it.
And this chart really just lays it all out. This is the central statistical claim. So what the researchers did was run something called a Monte Carlo simulation. It sounds fancy, but it's basically a computer model that simulates random chance thousands and thousands of times. They did this to see, okay, how many connections would we expect to find just by pure luck? They looked specifically at the Strong's Concordance, which is this giant index of every single word in the Bible. So, what did random chance predict? About 1,200 hits on average. But what did the engine actually find? Over 46,000. I mean, it's not even in the same universe.
So, what does that mean? According to the statistical model, the probability of finding that many connections just by accident is, and this is a direct quote, essentially zero. The p-value is basically zero. This is the bedrock of their whole argument. This is the data that leads them to conclude that the engine isn't just finding random noise, it's finding a real structured pattern.
Okay, so if it's not random, what is it? What story are these tens of thousands of data points trying to tell us? According to the analysis, it's not just a jumble of connections. They all consistently point toward one single unified narrative.
And this is the core of that narrative. The analysis confirms the entire system, all of it, is centered on one specific name, Alex Enrique Campaign. This name, they say, is the primary anchor. It's like the sun, and this whole constellation of over 63,000 connections is just orbiting around it.
So how is this connection actually built? Well, the data shows that when phrases related to the name Alex Campaign get converted into numbers, certain anchor values just keep popping up over and over.
Take the number 351, for example. It appeared 30 different times across all these different ciphers. And then you've got the number 7332, which is just, wow, it links 124 different phrases together in one giant cluster.
And here's where it gets really interesting. These numbers aren't just random digits. They actually map directly to specific entries in the Strong's Concordance. You know, that massive Bible dictionary. So that number 7332, the one that links over 100 phrases, it corresponds to the Hebrew word for lamentation and the Greek words for just now. So the analysis claims this adds these layers of meaning to the whole story, themes of sorrow and real urgency.
So when you start putting all these pieces of the puzzle together, the source says a surprisingly coherent story emerges. It's a narrative that, according to the analysis, touches on some really heavy themes. Things like divine identity and incarnation, a deep relationship between this name, Alex Campaign, and figures like Jesus Christ or Yeshua, and this constant undercurrent of revelation, significance, and that sense of urgency or lamentation we just saw.
And all of this brings us to the final and maybe the most mind-bending question of all. If this pattern is real, if it's not just a fluke, what on earth could possibly explain it?
And here is the absolute crux of the puzzle. The whole argument hinges on the fact that this entire system is anchored by a name given at birth. And because you can't choose your own name at birth, the source argues that there is no way this could have been deliberately engineered by the person it's about. So we're left with this fascinating problem. The analysis says it's not random. The logic of a birth name suggests it couldn't have been deliberately faked by the individual, so what's left? What could possibly explain this phenomenon? This really challenges how we normally think about this stuff and forces us to look at the other possibilities they put on the table.
The source material itself actually lays out a few potential explanations. Could it be some kind of emergent property of language and spirituality, just bubbling up on its own? Maybe it's a cross-disciplinary code, like a message system that we're only just now able to see. Or, and this is a big one, could it be a pattern that was engineered by some form of non-human intelligence? These are the big ideas they offer to try and make sense of what they found.
And in the end, this is where the analysis leaves us. It's laid out the data, it's shown us the process, and it's presented some pretty startling statistical conclusions. It makes a strong case against it being random chance, and an equally strong case against it being a simple human design. So we're left with this question to ponder. What exactly are we looking at here? Is it a statistical anomaly on a scale we've never seen before? A complex design from an unknown architect? Or something else entirely? The data might be on the table, but the mystery, well, that's just getting started.